It's been my most anticipated movie for what feels like the last 4 years.
Something that could be a game changer for all of those genres. You guys know what it is. It's Dune. It was #1 last year.
What is up, good fans? Welcome back to my channel. I just saw Dune at the New York Film Festival, and today we're going to talk about it spoiler-free, of course. I need you guys in the comments down below. Were you looking forward to this? Have you read the book? Watched the other movie? And stay tuned, because a bit later in the video, I'm doing a giveaway. Just be sure you're commenting, liking, and subscribing, but we'll talk about it. First off, I want to talk about this movie. So Dune tells the story of Paul Atreides, a brilliant and gifted young man born into a great destiny beyond his understanding. He must travel to the most dangerous planet in the universe to ensure the future of his family and his people. But as a malevolent force explodes into conflict over the planet's exclusive supply of the most precious resource in existence, a commodity capable of unlocking humanity's greatest potential, only those who can conquer their fear will survive. The planet is Arrakis, and Duke Leto Atreides is accepting stewardship of this dangerous desert planet, and the substance of this universe is known as the Spice. And what the Spice is, this is a drug that can extend human life, and it provides accelerated levels of thought. But that's not the only mystical aspect about this movie. Obviously, it is a pure fantasy, sci-fi, just drastic, bombastic, grand, and epic film. But there are also a few things about this film when it comes to the characters, what they can do, what they are capable of. Whether we are talking about Lady Jessica and Paul's special abilities, Duncan Idaho, what he can do on the battlefield, or just the character of Baron, because oh my goodness, but you guys will get into that. I don't want to get too specific. And we know Denis Villeneuve, my favorite director working in Hollywood right now, he can tackle sci-fi and nail it like a Blade Runner 2049, like an Arrival, two of my favorite movies. But with Dune, the source material has always been talked about as, quote-unquote, impossible to adapt. But what makes it so complex? What makes it so difficult to comprehend, not on its surface, but understanding the sheer amount of rules, characters, backstories to get the trajectory of Paul. And what Paul's trajectory is in this movie, I understand. I'm in the midst of the book right now. I haven't gotten all the way to part 2, but I've gotten further than what part 1 actually got us to. And Paul's journey shifts quite a bit in the second part, at least it begins to. And part 2 is going to be a very different movie than part 1. What part 1 is on its surface is build up for something that feels like it could be bigger and maybe even better, right? I really enjoyed this movie, but where we are headed with those characters and what happens, the fallout of all of these crazy and really tragic events in this movie, that's kind of what part 2 is going to bring us. But Paul's story, it is what you perceive as the typical hero's journey. Now, again, I understand we'll get to part 2 when we get to it, but just seeing what we saw in part 1, we have seen movies, concepts, stories like this before, not even referring to the book, just talking about different films in general. But Paul plays like a very different character in this movie, because not only is he holding the burden of knowledge, which I believe to be one of the most powerful things about this movie, but his path seems to be full of obstacles that no normal person can overcome, yes, but also one to where he's going to have to make extremely tough decisions about those around him and those that he loves. Because all throughout the movie, Paul is seeing visions, these strange visions that, at least in part 1, we're still not entirely sure how they work, when he is seeing, what he is seeing, and we understand on its surface that eventually he will encounter things like this, but how are those visions going to play out, not only in this movie, but in part 2? But beyond that, Paul's encounters are interesting as well. When we run into a group known as the Fremen, and these people have survived on Arrakis for so long because they've come up with some of the most creative ways to survive and to utilize their surroundings and manipulate them in a way that allows them to live life on this planet. And when we actually get a taste of that in this film, it is so fascinating to see how these people live. But within these individuals comes this meaning for Paul that he never really knew, started to slowly learn, but never imagined he would have, because he has always seen, or at least those around him have always seen, a certain path for him. But let's get into the characters and talk about how each character specifically impacts the narrative of the movie, starting with Timothée Chalamet as Paul. And I have seen a couple of criticisms that he's just kind of, moody and not as lively of a character as some people anticipate. And that's, it's Timothée Chalamet, but I think he does a great job in the film. I really do. He has to display a lot of emotion through not displaying a lot of emotion. Does that make sense? Probably not, but it seems like a very difficult task. Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, she probably gets the second most amount of screen time, Lady Jessica, because she's with Paul throughout much of this film, and her gifted abilities, along with teaching Paul those abilities and really just trying her best to allow him to choose his own path, but provide her guidance and assistance as his mother. He is willing to do anything to protect his mother, absolutely. But when it comes down to it, there's almost this unintentional burden that she is putting on Paul, and that's interesting when that gets explored, that relationship. Oscar Isaac as Duke, he is the leader that you kind of expect Oscar Isaac's character to be, right? He is imposing when he walks into a room. Just a scene where he walks into a meeting, everyone stands up, and I'm like, that guy, you don't want to mess with that guy. And we really never get to see a lot of action from him, but he does a great job as the character. I could talk about Zendaya. She doesn't really have as much to do in this movie. We know in part 2 she's going to have more to do, but does a really good job. Stellan Skarsgård as Baron. This is exactly what I wanted this. It's almost like what I perceive this character to be, but even more depth, and I think a lot of that is Skarsgård. Well, of course, Denis' direction, but Skarsgård bringing so much of this brooding, just haunting nature to this role that just kind of had me on my toes throughout the movie. You never know what he's going to do next. You don't know what he's capable of. Josh Brolin, Gurney Halleck. Brolin is great in the movie. He's that guy that, Duke will turn to and be like, why are you not smiling? He's like, I am smiling. And then he snaps his fingers, kills half the planet. Sharon Duncan Brewster, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Javier Bardem as Stilgar is actually pretty funny. He provides a nice amount of comedic relief in a couple of scenes, but an incredible leader for his people. Chin Chang is really good, and Dave Bautista, David Dastmalchian. I could go on. There is literally nothing wrong with this cast. If I had to choose a favorite character in this film, I would actually go Duncan Idaho, just because of Jason Momoa's presence, his excitement. He's like that dude, like the dude who walks into a room is like, what's up? But he's also this semi-imposing figure because and we get to see and experience that what he can do on the battlefield, and everyone around him seems to know that as well. He also has a nice amount of knowledge of the people around him. When he's talking of the Fremen, and of course he gets to spend some time with them, but he's just very aware as a character, which I loved. Also, I don't want to say too much, but there was a certain giant sandworm in the trailer, and we get a lot of that in this movie. So if you're going into this fearful that we're not going to get those big grand visual effects from the battles to the creatures to just the scope of what you kind of want Dune to be, one battle in particular when everything goes down and Baron is not being the best person in the world, my favorite scene in the movie, not only because the CGI was spectacular, not only because Hans Zimmer's score was just coming in booming and doing everything you want it to for that specific scene, but it's also one that Denis Villeneuve brings to life in a way that I believe makes it more accessible than those who read the book and have always believed that this can never be translated to the big screen. I believe Villeneuve does such a good job of fleshing out these characters, telling you who Paul is, why he's on this journey, what sets him out on this path, those around him, the abilities that he is blessed and cursed with, all of those things. I had no trouble whatsoever comprehending that. And again, I've read the first part of the book, right? But I believe those who haven't read the book, and I talked to some people afterwards who haven't, who thought the same thing. Well, this was way more accessible than I anticipated. I believe the biggest criticism is going to come when you talk about the length of this part 1, the fact that it feels like a part 1, and there's no definitive ending, right? A lot of these movies, they come out and they are their own movie, but it just so happens that there's another part attached. This is not necessarily the case. There is a clear beginning, a clear end, and I think the story is so well structured and well written, but at the same time, it's leading to something, and you cut off at the end, and you're just kind of waiting for that something. So it's really hard to judge this without getting the entirety of the experience, and most of the time your part 1s are going to be more character buildup and things that have to be established, and at times, exposition. Now, it all comes down to how that exposition is handled, so I really had no issues with it in this movie because there's a lot that Villeneuve has to do to force us to learn these characters, so in this case, the exposition really didn't bother me. If anything bothered me, it was just the fact that this part 1 was so lengthy at times, and because of that, the pacing does occasionally suffer, right? But that's just kind of the story that you're telling, the build-up that you're giving, and the fact that there are so many characters. And of course, I don't have to talk too much. I said in my immediate reaction, that's really all I talked about, was just on a technical level how brilliant this movie is. It is amazing. Some of the best visuals I have seen maybe ever. You talk about pure scope and sci-fi isms that come with movies like this, and whether it be an explosion or just a giant creature, if you will, and just the fact that Hans Zimmer brings us maybe one of his most compelling, operatic, epic, beautiful, haunting scores we have ever seen. The screaming in the background that you hear in some of the trailers, yeah, it may come off as, okay, that might be a little bit much. No. Whenever it happens, you feel it. And I will recommend to watch this on the biggest, bestest, and most wonderful theater screen you can find with some incredible sound, because the sound design, the score, everything about this movie on that level is absolutely masterful, and then visually stunning. Not one shot, not one time, not one camera movement was I, upset or offended at Denis Villeneuve. Everything he does is just spectacular from that perspective. So maybe a technical masterpiece. I'm not quite there yet with the all-encompassing movie, but on that level, it's absolutely phenomenal. I had no issues. I can't name one thing that I had a problem with on a visual and audio level. Before I give you guys my score, like I said, I will be giving away multiple Dune pop figures in this video. I was actually able to unbox them right before I came here. Check this out.
Oh, what's in the box?
Hopefully some Dune pop figures, and that's what I'm trying to open. You guys want to know when I ordered these? I ordered these a year ago. It's been, how many days are in a year? And the first one, of course, Baron Harkonnen in his own pop figure protection case, which again, I didn't know they were going to be in. Duke Leto, another figure that I will be giving away. Oh my goodness, Oscar Isaac in his greatness. Oh, look at this. Paul Atreides. Oh my goodness, this is a limited edition pop figure. It may be one of my favorite pop figures I've ever had. And then of course, normal Paul Atreides without his mask. Still looking great. Timothy Chalamet. Another item I will be giving away. How about Duncan Idaho, aka Jason Momoa, and his greatness. Oh, and then of course, Lady Jessica. Folks, I've been waiting a year for these pop figures, and it's worth the wait. And there we have it. 6 brand new Dune pop figures. Clearly I'm in New York right now reviewing the movie, but just know if I had them, they'd be in my background.
So only if you enjoy this video, drop your thumbs up, be sure to leave a comment. If you are a subscriber, you are entered into this competition. 3 opportunities and 3 really cool pop figures. Dune is a spectacular time in the theater. Villeneuve's craft is on full display as he effortlessly combines a brilliant cast with top-tier visuals. Yes, it is epic, but the subtle moments hit hard as well. Zimmer's outstanding score is the cherry on top. It definitely faces a fair share of obstacles because of the overwhelming complexity of the plot itself, but he does an impressive job. The pacing will definitely not be for everyone, but the unraveling of Paul's story becomes more and more interesting. I need part 2. Did it surpass my expectations? Well, my expectations were so lofty, I wouldn't say that, but it definitely meets them. And for a movie to do that from Denis Villeneuve is really impressive. My score is a 92%. For Dune, Part 1. Come on, guys. Let's go out to the theater and support this movie. We need Dune Part 2. I need Dune Part 2. There's so much that goes into this film that I'm just super excited to revisit, and it's one that has sat with me and sat really well. So maybe I see it again, love it even more, but as of now, those are my thoughts on Dune Part 1. I can't wait to see it again in IMAX or Dolby. What would you recommend? Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. Still in New York doing all kinds of stuff. Hung out with the Oscar expert the other day. I'll see you soon.